your seatbelts because in this episode, you're meeting Becky Mollenkamp, an accountability coach whose focus is rewriting business rules to put people ahead of profits without sacrificing success. After a decade-long journey of unlearning white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalist conditioning, she helps feminist founders dismantle shoulds, doubt, guilt, and other capitalist conditioning inside your business. She calls out the business coaching industry and shares how she too accidentally fell into just doing what other coaches were doing and how misaligned it felt. Becky helps us recognize the hedonic treadmill that is often how we operate, chasing moving targets year after year. She also helps us ditch the term imposter syndrome and recognize that it's just doubt. It's not a condition. It's a normal feeling, no matter your gender, race, or identity. Get ready for a conversation that will hopefully give you permission to make shifts inside your business in a way that feels equitable. Here we go. Becky, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really, really excited to chat with you.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we chatted a little bit before hitting record, but I would love to just start with your definition of abundance, whatever that is. And while you're explaining that, take us a couple years back and talk to me about how your viewpoint of what abundance is has shifted.
It definitely has. Now I think of abundance as having enough. So in whatever realm of life we're talking about, whether that's financial, which is where I think most people go to when they think about abundance, but I also think about rest, love, fun, play, stuff, all of it. I think of what's enough to feel content. Because I recognize now that contentedness to me is really the goal and not happiness, because happiness is a state that isn't sustainable. You don't have happiness if you don't have sadness. Like you have to have both sides of those coins. So we have happiness, we have sadness, we have all of those. But contentedness to me is like, even when I am feeling sad, I am content in knowing that I still have enough. I still know that even when I come out of the sadness, there's still enough there for me. But I'm not chasing some high of happiness. I'm not chasing something. I guess maybe abundance is no longer chasing, when I no longer feel like I have to chase because I feel like there's enough. But in the past, I think, I was very bought into capitalist ideas around needing more. Abundance was always more. It was always one more than whatever I had, right? Whatever the thing was, like I needed more. And I'm happy to say that I don't feel like I'm in that state anymore. But that is, I think, the state most of us are sort of brought into or conditioned into, thinking that we should always want more and not be satisfied. And so I think that creates this place of longing and desire and chasing, which makes us really good consumers. It's no wonder why capitalism wants us to feel that way, but it doesn't make us very content and satisfied people. And so for me, once I was able to let go of that and truly ask myself, what's enough? What is enough in all the parts of my life? That's when I started to feel the ease of the chase and into this more settled place of contentedness that to me feels abundant. It's not abundant in the way we've been conditioned to think of abundance, but for me, it feels abundant because there's no longer this like emptiness that I'm just constantly trying to fill and never being able to, because in that model, that capitalist model, there is no end. There is never enough. And so you can never feel abundant.
Yeah. The goal always moves, right? Like, oh, I want to hit, say 6 figures or whatever it is. You hit that. Oh, well, now that's not good enough. I want to do, 500,000 or whatever. Like when you're talking about money, revenue, whatever metric you choose, in all honesty, that goal really is moving constantly as you're approaching it. So you never actually hit that.
Yeah, they call that the hedonic treadmill. The constant chase, right? The set point always changes, where this now becomes, once I hit this thing, well, that's not quite enough. So now I'm back on the treadmill in the chase. And for me, it is like trying to figure out how to get off that hedonic treadmill, which is a psychological term that is exactly what you're talking about. The set point always changes. And I think capitalism definitely feeds into that.
Okay. So tell me, how did you shift? Or what was an exercise that you did? Or what's like a practical, tactical thing we can do to actually identify what is enough?
I would say how I shifted from my old views to now has been a long journey, starting with my brother's death. So I don't recommend that as a as a practical tool for this. Although most people who've been through something really big, like the loss of someone very close to them, start to recognize just how precious and short life really is. And that can be a real wake up out of that. Not for everyone, but for a lot of people, it can kind of help to wake you up out of that, to start to really sit with, what do I actually want? What's actually important? Is that BMW that I used to have, that, by the way, did not fulfill me, did not make me feel satisfied. I thought it would. It didn't. Is that it? Is it, oh, not the BMW, but now I need the Mercedes? Is that going to be the thing that does it, or the Porsche? Like, again, that set point keeps changing. When you confront mortality, that often is a really helpful place of saying, like, none of that matters. What actually matters is that I just have enough so that I can make sure my bills are paid, and that I'm not having to work myself to the bone, so that I can spend time with those I love and find times for joy and, fun in my life and pleasure. And so that's one thing, but that's not very helpful because not everyone goes through that. And I definitely don't wish that on anyone. The other thing that helped me a lot was going on my own journey of unlearning all of my racist and sexist conditioning of living in a white supremacist patriarchal culture. And that has been a very long journey. But the more that you go down that path of unlearning all of that, you necessarily unlearn a lot around the capitalist conditioning, because capitalism is a tool for upholding those systems. And so the more you start to unlearn those systems, you start to learn how it's all intertwined, and how capitalism and all of that conditioning we're getting about more and more and more is actually meant to perpetuate these really harmful systems that are about keeping people down and protecting a certain class of people. And so the more you start to unlearn that, a lot of this just begins to unravel, because it's like, oh, wait a minute, me participating in that system is actually going against so much that I actually really value. And so I have to start to let that go. If I really truly want to walk my values, I can't sit here and say, oh, I need to be Jeff Bezos, as I start to learn that, like, no, that's actually really harmful and is, goes against everything I truly value. And so I think the more that we start to do that work, like, it will necessarily start to fall. And so for me, that looks like reading. Mostly, I prefer to read Black women authors who are generously providing so much content out there on these sorts of issues to help us unlearn that conditioning. A great place to start, I think, even though this is a little like outside of that box, but I love the Nap Ministries' Tricia Hersey and her book, Rest is Resistance, because to me, it really gets to the point of capitalism and how it's meant to keep us on the go, and we are never resting. There's never time for us to actually enjoy life because we're always in this pursuit of more. And when we start to really think about, what does it look like for me to slow down, to rest, to say that I deserve rest and I don't have to earn it, like I just inherently deserve rest, I think that starts to do some of that unraveling. So I would recommend that maybe as a practical tool.
Have you ever pictured yourself having your own show? Maybe it's time. This show is edited and produced by podcastabundance.com. And if you like what we're doing, we can do it for your business too. I'm Virginia Elder, and I've been helping entrepreneurs start podcasts to market their business since 2019. I coach you through branding, structuring your episodes, workflow, and recording your podcast. Then my team and I professionally edit your audio and video so that you don't have to. We'll even write your episode descriptions and titles so that when potential customers turn to Google, your show appears in their search results. Establish authority in your niche, expand your reach, and create a library of helpful content for potential and current clients, all with your own podcast. I'm here to hold your hand and make podcasting the exciting, up-leveling experience it should be, skirting you past the tech and software struggles too. Take the first step by booking a call with me using the link in the show notes or by visiting podcastabundance.com. Now,
on to the rest of the show.
Yeah. Thank you. I love that. And I think that might have been around the time when I met you, was when you were really doing some deep work around stepping back from your business, I think, and like committing to rest for yourself and re-envisioning what should my business look like in alignment with these values that I feel so deeply. So tell us about your business, and because I feel like you're already like leaning straight into it because this is who you are. And that's the beautiful piece of you that I love so much. You've been able to craft this business and offers that really embody your values. So walk us through what happened, what that step back looked like for you, and how you were able to slow down and then almost like rebuild intentionally.
Well, my business has been through quite the journey. My background is actually journalism. So I used to be a freelance. Well, even before that, I was a newspaper writer, a magazine editor. And then the internet came along and changed everything. I was doing freelance writing and then a lot of content marketing. And then my brother died. So now we're caught up to that. And that was in 2010. That sort of changed everything of my trajectory. Again, that wake up call. And I realized, like, I don't want to do this. I'm good at it, but I don't like it. What do I want to do? And through that, I started to realize I really just want to help other women stop living lives of should, because that's where I had been. I had really been a good girl, quote unquote, good girl, doing all the things a good girl's supposed to. I went to a good school. I married a good guy. I, built the big house. I had the enviable career, all the things except children. Thankfully, I didn't do that good girl thing before I was ready, but I was doing all the good girl stuff and I was really unhappy. And that's a really hard place to be when your life looks good on paper, but you don't feel good about it, because that disconnect feels awful. You start to put it on yourself, like, why can't I feel about my life the way everyone says I should? And so that was a whole process of unraveling and figuring out. And for the first time in my life at 35, asking myself, what do I actually want in my life? And that was what put me down this path of I don't know exactly what it is. I just know that I don't want to see other women have to lose their brother to wake up out of that slumber of the good girl stuff. So what does that look like? And at first I thought, because at that time, through my grief around my brother, I was doing a lot of running, a lot. I ran a marathon. I ran a lot of half marathons. I put a lot of miles on my legs in those days. So I thought, well, maybe it's being a personal trainer. That will help women feel better about themselves. I'm so thankful I didn't continue down that path, because now I'm very anti-diet culture. But at that time, I had not unlearned everything. So that was sort of the beginning of that process. And then I realized after a while, I don't think this is exactly it, but what is it? So then it was coinciding with the boom of online business. And so me sort of spending a lot of time in online business and thinking okay, I don't necessarily want to grow this personal training business, but I do love all this online business I'm learning about. And I discovered for the first time then coaching, and I thought, oh, now that sounds interesting. And like everyone, I thought, well, I'll just hang up my shingle and be a coach then. And I was like, what do I coach about? I guess I'll be a business coach. I didn't know I should never have been a business coach, but I was at that time I'll be a business coach. And I'm trying to help people with online business when I barely know what I'm doing. Now, listen, I think you can help people who are a step behind you. I think that's valid. What I was doing was not all that valid, but it was a part of my journey that was important. And then I started to realize this isn't it either, because I don't know what I'm doing. And I felt that imposter syndrome that was not just in syndrome, but reality. I shouldn't have been doing that work. And so then I realized okay, I want to actually I want to be a certified coach, because I feel like I'm missing something here. And that was big, because I really learned the skill of coaching, the art of coaching, and how to actually coach and not do what most people who call themselves coaches do, which is actually consulting strategy. I do coaching. Occasionally I will do strategy or consulting with people, but that's a separate hat. But so that was a big part of the process, was getting certified. During that same time, Michael Brown was murdered in Ferguson, where I was living, a half a mile from my doorstep. I had to leave my house that night because the fires were getting too close. It was very much there. And that process really, really shook me out of another slumber. So I feel like my brother's death was the most important milestone. Michael Brown's murder was the second biggest milestone in my life, because it was the time that actually made me start to say, wait a minute, am I really the feminist I think I am? Because I was starting to do some research and some blogging about what was happening because I was living right there and it felt so important. And as I started to learn the reality of the Black experience in America beyond what I just sort of knew it to be at this high level of, white privilege on the outside looking in, and really understanding like the real statistics around what that experience is and learning from Black people what that lived experience is, I realized there is so much here I don't know. And I have actually just been a good white liberal, but not really a true intersectional feminist. I didn't even know what that meant at that time. Learning all of that really shaped my worldview in a new way. And that process has been running, like for a long time, it was sort of running, coinciding with my work, but not, those two didn't overlap. So I was going down this path of becoming a coach, doing more like mindset, I'm using air quotes if you're listening, mindset coaching, because again, that's problematic. I mean, the coaching industry as a whole is pretty problematic, but mindset coaching in particular is pretty problematic. But I was still sort of there. And it wasn't until I started to feel more comfortable in that journey of unlearning. So from 2014 to probably it was actually right before George Floyd was murdered. So around 2019 is when I started to say, I've been doing all of this work, and now I'm looking at my, like this internal work around unlearning racism and sexism. And now I'm looking at the way I'm showing up in the coaching business, and these things feel a little misaligned. Like I'm out here, I see all these other white women who are who I was a decade ago coaching, and I'm sort of emulating what they're doing. And that doesn't feel good because I see how problematic it is. All of this stuff where they're not acknowledging their privilege. They're trying to help people for who have such different life experiences that they cannot understand, and trying to sell them solutions that are supposed to work because it worked for them. Like all of the stuff that was really icky and harmful, and having to confront and I'm participating in that. And it reached a point for me where I was like, I can't anymore because it feels so wrong. And so I remember right at the beginning of 2020, I started to make this big shift. I was looking for communities where I could learn more and be in more diverse spaces and be with other coaches who were getting it the way I was. And then George Floyd was murdered, and the whole world sort of woke up and joined in this conversation that I've been having with myself. And it was really freeing in a way because it was like, oh, now I don't feel like this weirdo who's thinking about these things and wrestling with all this and figuring out what it means in my business. There's all these other people I can be talking to about this, and thank God. And so that really changed things for me too. And it also was the final straw for me that said, I got to go all in. I can't keep straddling these two things. I have to figure it out. But it also meant I had to really slow down. So I think you and I probably met in 2022, maybe. So I had already been a while into this slowdown period of starting to back off, figuring out what it looks like to integrate this. I was starting to do it in my work, but I wasn't talking about it as publicly. And then it was the end of 2022 when I was like, okay, I just know, I don't know what it looks like yet. I just know all I want to do is talk about these big, important things. I'm so tired of anything else. It's all I want to talk about. And so I was like, you know what? One way to be able to have these conversations that I care deeply about is I'll start a podcast, because you can't just ask a random stranger necessarily, will you come and talk to me about sexism and racism? They're like, I don't know you. Why would I? But when you say, will you come be on my podcast and talk about these issues? They'll be like, well, of course. Yes. And so it was just really an excuse for me to have those conversations. So and from that, this last year and a half, my business has radically shifted because I allowed myself to just say, I'm just going to for a while, take off the gas pedal on making money, really just put on the gas pedal on exploring the things that actually matter to me, and basically kind of hope it works out. Really, it was sort of, and I know there's a lot of privilege in that, so I want to recognize that, but that was kind of what it looked like for me on making that shift. And a lot of that was rest, although I wasn't always resting, but it was a lot of slowing down on my business the way it had been. That was a really long answer, and I'm sorry.
I love that you walked us through your life events plus public events that we remember, and then how that was affecting your perspective of how you ran your business and what you were doing. And, you hit on the coaching space and all of that. And I've seen that for years where, I'm building my business, and sure, I do see the value in getting a business coach, but I was always very confused of has this person run a business before? Why are they a coach? Could they really help me? and I try to dig into their background and I can't find their previous successful business that they're going to now teach me how to do. Like, there were so many things that I was confused about looking at that space. So thank you for just calling it out and telling us, it is what it is, and walking us through your story. The other piece that I want to highlight is that I think many entrepreneurs have some level of a rock bottom moment that defines and shapes their business. I've been vocal about our family's rock bottom moment as a financial issue, and that's how I discovered Personal Finance Podcasts, and I go into detail about that in one of the episodes. That shaped how I moved forward from that date. So a family member passing, anything like that. I think we all have those wake up moments where we're just like, it's important to me to structure things so that this means something and we learn from it and it changes our trajectory. I mean, you said it. So thank you for sharing that. I really love that. Something else that you said that I want to touch on is the imposter syndrome versus truly identifying or feeling that you are an imposter. So the imposter syndrome thing is like thrown around so much in this space. Tell me, how does someone recognize, like, okay, I'm just having these feelings. It's imposter syndrome. It's completely normal as an entrepreneur and trying to venture into this space versus, no, this is not something I should be doing. I'm playing in the wrong field here. So how do we recognize that?
Yeah, well, I have lots of thoughts on that because, first of all, I really hate the term imposter syndrome. I know I used it only because everyone knows that term, but
yes.
I think it's entirely sexist, even though it was women who invented the term. It came out of the 1970s, which was a very different time. And it was a study around women specifically, talking about why do women have this unique sort of phenomenon that happens and this term coined of like the imposter syndrome, which is upsetting for a lot of reasons, because one, why do we have to pathologize this thing, right? And call it a syndrome, make it seem as if there is something wrong with you. And when it is something that is about a normal human feeling, which is doubt. Men feel doubt all the time, right? But more people are starting to use imposter syndrome more universally, but it came out of the 70s specifically around women and is still used far more for women and by women than for or by men. Okay. And it is describing self-doubt. That is ultimately what it means. It's this feeling of self-doubt. Yeah. And that is a normal feeling. We should not pathologize a normal human emotion, and especially when we're doing it only for one gender and saying that this particular group of people have it and these other people don't, when men have doubt all the time. Really what it needs to be, what should have been explored and has since, and many people talk about it, is the conditioning that men and women receive around doubt, right? Men are conditioned to push through the doubt, to ignore the doubt, to take action, to be bold despite the doubt. Women are conditioned to listen to the doubt, to succumb to the doubt, right? To play small because of that doubt, to let it rule them, which is why men apply for jobs when they meet 50% or less of the qualifications all the time. And women don't apply for jobs if they don't meet 90 to 100% of qualifications. And this is a problem. And to me, it's all grounded in the same sexist crap that imposter syndrome, quote unquote, is. So it's normal, first of all. It is normal to feel doubt. We all feel doubt. Men and women, we all feel doubt, and there's not a syndrome. You don't have a disease. There's nothing wrong with you. So I think, like, to me, a big piece of it is just releasing that story that we've been given about our doubt, especially as women, and to just say, I'm feeling doubt, to name it as doubt instead of this syndrome. I'm feeling doubt. Okay. Does everyone feel doubt? Yes. That's normal to feel doubt. Now, how do you start to discover if it is rational or irrational doubt, right? Doubt grounded and based in facts versus this other feeling of doubt that is very normal, but we just need to sort of push beyond to go ahead because we actually have the skills. And some of that is starting to get honest about exactly that. Are these rational or irrational thoughts? One way to look at that is, are they very black and white? thoughts that are more irrational tend to be very black and white, meaning I either can do this or I cannot do this. I'm either amazing at this or I suck at this, right? There's no room for gray in those kinds of thoughts. That is very much that irrational kind of doubt. That is our brain playing tricks on us, trying to keep us from taking action. Rational doubt would say it gets curious. It asks questions. Do I know what I'm doing here? Could I do this? Is this something I could figure out? Could I learn? Right? And then you can also just look at your CV, look at your resume, look at your experience, look at your background, ask people around you who know you and know what you can do. Am I missing something here? But honestly, if you're at the place of asking those questions, it's probably rational doubt. It's not irrational, right? The irrational stuff is that like, well, obviously I don't know what I'm doing. I could never do this. What was I thinking? Never, always, those kinds of words. That's the time I would say, more than likely, you're perfectly capable. You have the experience. You have the skill. You're just scared. You just have doubt and fear. And that's normal. It's okay to have doubt and fear, right? We have to sort of be with it, name it, give yourself some comfort and love around it, and then decide, is it worth taking the action anyway? But when it's this other rational sort of thing, that very often is an indication that, no, there's actually something here that is worth exploring, that this isn't just doubt and fear, but this is actually something I'm lacking. There is something I need to shore up. So for me, when I was looking at that, I was saying like, do I actually have the skills to be doing this? Do I even know what coaching really means? These are very rational questions. And if I don't have a very good answer to them, then the answer is probably no, I shouldn't be doing that yet. Right? And then that's okay. And that's also okay. But that's not just doubt and that's not just fear. That is actually a lack. Speaking of abundance and lack, that's an actual lack, right? There's an actual lack there that needs to be shored up. And there's no failure in that. The recognizing of that is really powerful because then you can take care of it, shore that up, and then you will be able to move forward. But there is a difference between those two, and both things are very normal and okay. And I would love to see us all remove some of the judgment around them.
Okay, so thank you for changing the term and just letting us all just say self-doubt instead of imposter syndrome, because I also don't know like when that phrase popped into anyone's vocabulary. It just like showed up one day and it's been ruling our lives ever since. And I know firsthand, I have doubt. My husband has doubt. My kids have doubt. Like it's a normal feeling, like you said. But I think in entrepreneurship, so many people have just started to throw around this imposter syndrome thing.
Because they can make money on it.
Is that okay? So is it like another?
I don't want to be
thing?
that blunt, but I'm going to be that blunt. It's because they can make money on it. As soon as we can turn something into a syndrome that could be cured, we can make money on that. And that's one of the reasons I hated calling myself a mindset coach, because there's a lot of folks out there that are trying to make money on curing you of your imposter syndrome, curing you of this disease that you have, instead of what I think is far more valuable. And there are also many good people who help people with these issues in very, very healthy ways. But there are many people out there who are trying to sell you like their 3-step solution to like overcoming your imposter syndrome without any amount of compassion, no amount of normalization of it, right? They continue to feed into this idea that there is something wrong with you, that there's this that's a problem that needs to be solved, when in fact, doubt's not a problem that needs to be solved. Doubt is normal and it's necessary. Doubt serves an evolutionary goal, right? Like if we didn't have doubt, imagine how dangerous that would be. Can you picture your children not having doubt? The things that they would do, the things that you would do if you never doubted. I don't want somebody to perform surgery on me because they have no doubt that they could do it. Heck no. Like if you don't know what you're doing, you better not perform. Doubt's important, right? So we need to acknowledge that it is normal and that it's actually a necessary thing and that very often it's protecting you, right? It's showing up to protect you from what? Let's examine that. Let's figure out what it's protecting you from, the why behind that. And then also love ourselves and be compassionate as we move through it, because too often what those like solutions are doing is just encouraging people to push through and do things without safety. And that again goes back to where there's a lot of racism that's happening and a lot of perpetuation of that that's really dangerous, because there's a lot of white women with a lot of privilege who don't have to live in the same sort of doubt and fear state that a woman of color might. And they're trying to sell them this solution that doesn't address their safety, whether we're talking physical or emotional safety. And that is problematic. It is dangerous. It can traumatize or re-traumatize people. And that's why I think it is just so dangerous. But the reason it's so prevalent now is because there's good money to be made on selling solutions to imposter syndrome, because everyone has it. Everyone has doubt. So if I can teach you how to not be scared, how to not have doubt, oh boy, the world's your oyster, right? You'll pay me good money for that. And that's part of the reason I stopped being a mindset coach, because it's gross.
I love that. Thank you. Okay. Well, and the other picture that came to mind is how easy it would be to label yourself as an imposter, or feel like an imposter, if you're a Black woman looking at an industry saying there's nobody high up that looks like me, that's even remotely close to my skin color, right? And so that's that imposter like language.
Yes.
And so I could definitely see how that.
And it's no surprise that the survey came out in the 70s when women were finally trying to break through that glass ceiling. And it focused specifically on women feeling doubt. And instead of saying, hey, why might these women in the corporate environment be feeling doubt about themselves? Oh, because they're going into rooms that are entirely men. Let's examine what's wrong with them as individuals that they have doubt. And that is the problem with so much of what's out there. It focuses on the individual and not the systemic issues. And that's what's different about my coaching today. Through all of this work and me finally get to this place of full integration of all these parts of me, is that my work now is very much grounded in, there are very few things when you actually examine them that are individual problems. It is almost always a product of systemic issues. And I think if we are not looking at those things as coaches with our clients, and frankly, if we're not looking at those things as all service providers with our clients, we are doing everyone a real disservice.
Yeah. Thank you. That's awesome. Okay. So
I've really been on a soapbox. I'm so sorry.
No, there aren't many experts in this area that I know that I'm in contact with. So you are by far the voice in my life around this. And I love that so much. And I try very hard to support my Black and, various background friends, but I am aware that my experience is never truly going to be, even clear insight into what they have experienced. So thank you. I love your voice.
And nor is mine,
this.
just to be clear. Like I might have more experience and education around a lot of these issues. And I fully know that I will never know what it's like to be a Black woman. I will never know what it's like to be a woman in a wheelchair, right? All of the various identities that are out there that I don't hold, I will never know. And I think that's the most important piece, is that the recognition that you can't know that. That goes a long way, because there's too many people who don't even get to that place. And then they're out there selling solutions to people as if there's a universal solution because we have some sort of universal experience. As soon as you can start to recognize, oh, humans don't have a universal experience, and every solution, I don't care what you're selling, that comes into play. The understanding that everyone does not have a universal experience. And so the way you approach your product or service, the way you market your product or service, all of that, if you're not thinking about what is the experience of other people with this product or service, or the way I'm talking about this, or the promises I'm making, that is a problem. And it is what's happening by and large out in the marketplace. The few people that are actually starting to ask themselves those questions, it doesn't even mean you have to change your product or service, but it means I need to think about these things. And then what does that mean for who I'm selling to, how I'm selling to them, how I'm working with them? If you're doing that, you are in the top 5% of business owners in these issues, because most people aren't even doing that.
Awesome. Well, that's perfect, because that was what I was going to ask you. Like, okay, as business owners, anybody listening here, I hope, is a business owner. That's what the show is for. So with this information, let's say what you're bringing today, let's say it's new information to somebody and they're like, holy crap, I'm doing it all wrong. I need to blow up my business and start over. You're shaking your head. So how do we approach business now that we know this information?
Well, first of all, the doing it wrong, the very idea of right and wrong, there's one right way, that is very much grounded in white supremacy, and it's not true. And there's many ways to do very many things. And again, there's no universal human experience. So there's no universal way of doing anything, including business. And don't blow up your business unless you want to blow up your business. But like, you have to blow up your business. I didn't. I evolved my business, and we can all evolve our business. My business has changed so much from 2005 when I was a freelance writer, 2010 when my brother died and I started to become a personal trainer. And then the way my coaching has changed since 2012 to today is it's an evolution. And the idea that we should have it all figured out and we have to do it perfectly, again, that's white supremacy, and it's just silly. We're humans. We learn, we evolve, we grow, we change, and that's normal. So if you do want to do better, and I hope people do, because it's 2024, folks. Like, it's time to start trying and do better if you're not already. And if you haven't, it's okay. Like, don't beat yourself up. None of that matters. I learned a long time ago, my white guilt does not change anything about racism. It's pointless and useless. Guilt doesn't do anything. It's not productive. So what do we do moving forward? Start listening and learning. Listen, most especially to Black women, because Black women, when we look at intersectionality, they have a very unique perspective that very few others have. They have the perspective of both sexism and racism and where those two things intersect. And that is exceptionally important. It's also really valuable to listen to disabled folks, right? To listen to people who are trans or have different experiences of gender expression. So, listening to people who have the lived experience that you don't is really valuable. Follow them on social media, seek them out and find them. There are many amazing educators. I could list 1,000. I won't, but you can find them on social media. That's one place to start for free and easy. Just start following different voices on social media. If your social media feed is nothing but people who look like you, that is a problem. You're not expanding your worldview in any way. So start following them. Listen. Don't speak over them, right? Listen. And then when you feel ready, you can begin to amplify their voices. Right? Share them. Again, don't speak over them. Don't speak for them, but amplify their voices. Also, there's a wealth of books out there that we can explore to learn. Type in best anti-racism books. Make sure you're buying books from people of color. Don't buy that one white lady's anti-racism book. Buy an anti-racism book from people of color who have the lived experience. The same for any of the things. If you want to learn more about disability, if you want to learn more about ageism, if you want to learn more about, neurotypical and neurodifferences, but find the people who have the lived experiences who've written the books and read them. There are so many. And just doing that alone begins to expand your worldview. And it will start to change things inside of you. Like, people often ask me, what are the things you've done? I've taken some courses, I've done some stuff, but truly the thing that has made the biggest difference is just listening, learning how to just listen to different people and drop my defenses. And I tell people all the time, if there's one thing you can do, it's drop your defenses. And that is the hardest thing as a person with an oppressor identity. And, while I may have a marginalized identity as a woman, I'm white, and that is an oppressor identity. So both of those things can be true. And it means that I can step into those defenses very easily. Oh, but not me. No, I don't do that. No, I'm one of the good ones. Oh, no, we don't all do that. That's not helping anything. And it's only trying to excuse you from having to learn. So as soon as you can drop those defenses and listen, everything will begin to change inside of you. But that is hard work. It is hard work to continually check into yourself to say, I don't have to prove that I'm the exception here. I don't have to fight and get brownie points for being exceptional. None of that is helping anything. And it's only excusing me from having to do the hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. And once we start doing that work and become aware of this, and let's say we follow and we read the books and we're working on it, how do we adjust inside our business? Is it important to like a tactical piece of inside our business? Do we need to, review our website or review the language we're using on social media? Or how do we make sure that we are shifting? And the language should come naturally with anything new that you're sharing or posting, right? Because of this new information that you're learning. But what about the stuff that's a little bit stagnant, like your offers on your website or anything that's still, right, that's been published? What do we do? When we realize, oh man.
I've revisited everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's normal. You just start revisiting everything as you start to feel more comfortable. And you will feel, at least for me, you will probably start to feel called to do that. Because as you start to listen and learn, you will start to notice where, oh, I've been doing that. Or, oh, I hadn't thought about the way I talk about that. Or, oh, golly, what is my pricing saying to people? Or, all of it. And slowly you just start to change. And again, this is an evolution. It's not like one day you read one book, you have the answers, and then you make all the changes and everything's better. And now you've checked that box. That is the problem that happened in 2020. Everyone wanted to check the DEI box. And boy, DEI folks were busy, busy, busy from the summer of 2020 until into 2021. And guess what? Now they're looking for work. They can't get people to hire them. People are cutting left and right. DEI, if you look at any of the major corporations, they've been cutting. DEI is going away because everyone feels like, oh, I checked that box. I did that. It's good.
We did that 2 years ago. We're good. Okay.
Because it will be a life. If you are truly committed to this, it's a lifelong process. And it's very hard for white people, especially, and for men to, especially for white men, but for men, anyone who has an oppressor identity, it's very difficult to sit with the knowledge that there is no finish line, because we are so conditioned to be achievers, especially in America, and that we're supposed to get stuff done, check off those boxes, reach the finish line, hit the goal. That's the way we're conditioned. And to know that there's no finish line to this work, you will forever have to be unlearning racist, sexist, ableist conditioning. This stuff is so deeply rooted. You will never be done with this project. And that's really hard to sit with. So that also means then the work is never done on changing your business. I know that mine will continue to evolve as I continue to learn. I will never get it right. And I keep messing up and I have to keep making amends. And, I have to do restorative justice, and that's okay. But it takes a long time to get there. And that's why I will also say, you have to go on the journey. I didn't even start to integrate this stuff into my business for 5 years. Even remotely. They were two separate parts of my life because I didn't feel that comfort. And even then it was very slow. And so for the last 5 years, it's been more and more until really it took me a decade to get to a place of feeling enough comfort to speak this much about it, to be this vocal, to be this forceful. So don't think it's going to happen overnight. But when you look at everything, look at your messaging, who you're working with, how you're talking about what you do, what are your offers, what are the promises inside of those offers, how are you pricing things? I switched to equitable pricing after learning more. There are a lot of things you can do, but I think to me it starts with the learning and then values. Getting real clear on your values. Mine changed a lot after all of this. One of my values is now liberation. It would have never been that 10 years ago, right? Now it is. But then what does that mean in practice, right? What does it look like to actually run a liberatory business? What does that mean? And so that means for me things like, how much do I actually work? I can't be claiming liberation and then working myself 60 hours a week, because that's not liberatory. Nobody wants to work 60 hours, but that's not liberation from capitalism, right? Part of my liberation too is then how am I redistributing wealth? Where is my money going? Getting to how much is enough? That's part of liberation to me. What's enough? I don't want to be Jeff Bezos. So if I don't want to be Jeff Bezos, then how much is enough? And how much of my wealth can I and do I want to redistribute? And where does it go? These are all things that start to come up as you start to do the work.
Thank you. You're giving me so much to think about. Thank you. And I think people listening almost will need a quiet moment with this as well. Thank you so much.
Probably. And I want to say, if it's okay, I know it can sound preachy, and I don't want to sound preachy, because I also fully recognize we're all in our own place on this journey. And if you hear this and there's something inside of you that says, I know I want to do more, but I don't want Becky to lecture me. I don't want to lecture you. I don't. I want to honor wherever you're at in your own journey, because we're all where we are, right? And if this is the first that any of this is coming to you, that's okay too. It's okay. Yes, it's 2024. And yes, George Floyd was 4 years ago. But guess what? We all come to it in our own time and in our own way. And I know there are many people that that use a lot of guilt and shame around some of these issues. And I don't think that's ultimately helpful. What's helpful is to say, where are you? And what are you ready to do? What can you start to do differently? And just start making that commitment from today forward. The past doesn't matter. We just need to start making a difference right now. And I am speaking obviously to people who have oppressor identities. For folks with marginalized identities, it's a very different story, right? I understand that, because as a woman and as a queer person, I get that's probably where more of my righteous anger comes from. But I also have to fully sit in the fact that I'm able-bodied and I'm white and I have a lot of privilege. And so I also understand that like defensiveness that comes inside of that, and that like challenge of sitting with the fact that I have privilege. And for most people, we have a little of both. Most people hold at least some oppressor identities and some marginalized identities. And we will often want to cling to the marginalized identities. And we have to be ready to fully own the other parts too, and say, what are my obligations? What are my responsibilities? What is my duty to make change here from the privilege that I do hold? Even when I also have marginalized identities, what is the privilege I have and how do I want to use that? But I just want to say, like, I hope I don't sound like I'm lecturing, because I really don't want to lecture. I want everyone to just say, like, I want to do better, and I will start making small changes and know that that is good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I'll offer that, and again, I don't know when we met. Maybe it was 2 years ago. I'm not sure. We've been online friends and kind of like mini mastermind mom friends for a little while. And I've never felt preached at, or like, you're like, you got to change this and you're doing this wrong, whatever. I've never felt that way. But I think a lot of what you've said here and what I've known of you is always giving me something to walk away and just sit quietly with. So if that's your reaction to this episode, then take that time and do that and think about it. And like you said, what small thing can be different? Maybe it is ordering a book. Find your piece of where you're ready to move based on where you are now. So yeah, I don't think you're preachy at all, but I think this is a great segue to share with us about your show and take us back to where you said, you know, I stepped back and I wanted to rebuild things with this very intersectional feminist lens. I have the podcast, you know, maybe this is going to work, maybe this isn't. I wasn't really sure where my business was going at that point. So bring us up to date and give us some tactical things that you did, like inside your business through this new lens, how you built out this podcast, and is it bringing clients your way, or is it creating these amazing conversations? What's the community like? I know community is one of your big values. So how have you built this now with these ideals and with intention, even not fully knowing how it was going to work?
Yeah, I always say it started very selfishly just because I wanted to have the conversations. I'd had a feminist book club that had started to wane after 5 years or 4 years. And so I knew I wanted to keep having these conversations. And so my previous podcast had been on hiatus. It was called The Gutsy Boss. And it was really intended to be a marketing vehicle for my business. I was doing it, supposed to be weekly. I would go, and then I'd burn myself out, and then I'd have long stretches without episodes. Like, I'm sure everyone can relate to all of that, and had been on hiatus for months because I think I'd really reached a place of like, I don't really want to even do this. It doesn't even feel good anymore. But I didn't know what I would do instead, and I felt like I was supposed to, you know, back to shoulds, like I should do this or whatever. And so I finally was like, what if I just did a new podcast entirely that I actually just want to do? Just want to do it because I want to have these conversations. So it started selfishly. There was no business intention. I kept the other podcast thinking I'll use that for business, and this will just be for like my personal expression and for fun. And the other one I think may still be out there because they can pay $5 a month on Libsyn to just hold on to it for now. But like, yeah, I don't know why, because other than I just figured the episodes are there in case anyone wants to listen. But I realized quickly, like, this is it. Like, once you hit on the thing that feels really good, you're like, oh, this feels so good. I just want to do this. And I don't really care if it makes money. I don't really care what it does. I just want to have these conversations. So at first it was selfish. Then I was like, oh, I started to realize there are other people who are like me, who want to do business differently, who care about these same kind of issues. And they feel like alone, like I did, because I felt very alone in this, right? That's why when George Floyd was murdered, finding other people who were having these conversations felt really affirming. And I knew there were other people who were probably feeling that same way. So I started to see the benefit of like, oh, this could serve a purpose. This could be helpful beyond just my selfish needs. And then I was like, but then I want to create community around that because if there's other people who are feeling this way, part of that, I want to help them feel less alone with the podcast. But what if they found each other and they started to feel less alone? So that was where the idea of a newsletter, a Substack newsletter came out, because I'd been exploring Substack as a reader and loving some of the communities I was finding. So I'm like, this could be a really great tie so that listeners can find each other through the newsletter. So I'll cross promote those things. And then I also started to think like, also, it does showcase a bit of like, it's slightly helpful for my business. I hope it is helpful for my business, because what I do now, I don't know if I ever fully said, is I'm an accountability coach. I use that term because I'm really a business coach, but not in the strategist consultant way, in the way that a business coach should show up, which is I work with business owners to help them come to their own understandings and their own decisions about what they want to do with their business, that in a way that's fully aligned with their values, shared values that I hold around, equity, social justice, caring deeply about the world and humanity. How do you really integrate that into your business? How do you free yourself from capitalism and say, like, what does it look like to run a business that I actually want to run in a way that feels really good? And so I'm interviewing people who are doing that. So having these conversations, I think, ultimately sort of shows a bit of what I do. It gives me a chance to talk and show my knowledge around these issues and how I talk to business owners about these things. And my guests would be my ideal clients, if that ever happened, I don't know. And I've had clients on as guests now too, because they're doing the work and it's great. How is it serving my business? I think right now it's really more of top of funnel awareness. Well, maybe it's middle of funnel. It's like nurturing, right? So people become aware of me through primarily Threads at this point, or some social media forum, but Threads seems to be the biggest one. They usually get into the newsletter next for that discovery, or they find me through the newsletter. So one of those two ways, either go Threads to the newsletter or just find me on the newsletter. And then they discover the podcast and start listening. And there's something about a podcast, having someone in your ears, getting to know them on that week by week basis, really hearing them and it's an hour or more conversation. There's that intimacy that then helps move people towards like, what do you do? How do I work with you? I want a little more of you in my life. And that is what will bring them into some of my offers. So it does all sort of work together, but it happened. I would love to say it happened super strategically, but it didn't.
Yes, but in a way, it was still very strategic and intentional, because you were creating things that you were passionate about, whether it be a newsletter or a podcast or adjusting your coaching to this, certain lens. And so all of those things almost can't not have helped each other, right? And can't not have been related. And I think that is the beautiful piece of when we are able to truly sit down and identify values, which is kind of the really abundance, the term to me. The more people I talk to and the more definitions I'm getting of it, it's really another word for values. Because when you define what your definition of abundance is, a lot of times, if you were able to list your values in the same conversation, they'd almost be the same, or they would be words that are shared. So I think that's perfect.
Or abundance is living into my values, at least for me. Like when I'm fully living in my values, I do feel more abundance. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of picking up from, 20 or 30 conversations now of just, hey, what does abundance mean to you? And kind of going into like the business and hearing a little bit about people's backstory. I'm hearing values over and over and over, whether they're different, different values for different people, right? Same way that everybody's definition of abundance is different, but you took it to your values, and started building out intentional pieces that you were passionate about in your podcast, in your newsletter, in various communities that you're participating in and creating. And it's like impossible for one to not feed into the other, to me, looking from the outside in. So I love that you did that. And since we're talking about that, tell us about your show, what it's called, where to find you, how to follow you. You mentioned Threads. Tell us your handles, all that stuff.
The podcast is called Feminist Founders, and I interview feminist founders. Well, I interview founders, small business owners, bigger business owners who are trying to do business differently, who care deeply about equity and social justice. So whatever that looks like for them, and not all of them identify as feminists, especially the women of color very often don't. And I fully respect that, and we talk about that. But it's called Feminist Founders because I'm an intersectional feminist and I really care deeply about these issues. And you can find that anywhere you listen to podcasts. And then you can find me at BeckyMollenkamp.com, and I'm Becky Mollenkamp on Threads and on Instagram. And the newsletter is actually also Feminist Founders on Substack, but you can find it on my website as well. And that's been growing and developing a community. And I do monthly Feminist Founder forums for paid subscribers. Well, they can come for free. Otherwise it's $10, but we do these really intimate, wonderful, vulnerable, just beautiful discussions around issues that affect business owners who care about these kinds of things. So that's another way to get to know me a little more too.
Yeah, thank you. I love that. So I want to throw this out there for anybody who's listening. One baby step that I have discovered of how to support and shift in just the most tiny way. We mentioned buying some books. So instead of your default move for books being from Amazon or Audible, I want to share Libro FM, Libro.fm. It is a Black-owned bookstore online. And so you can buy a physical book. You can also listen. It's just like Audible. It's literally like the same thing, same price point, $14.99 a book or whatever membership. So instead of Audible being your default book option, I'm going to get some book recommendations for Becky beyond Trisha Hershey's book, but just a few more that we could digest. And then I'm going to link them all through Libro FM for us. So again, baby step, try the app, try the website, and I've really enjoyed it so far. So
yeah, if I can make another recommendation, I would say bookshop.org is another one to look at. If you want to buy a physical book, and Feminist Founders is on there, you can go and see all of the book recommendations from my episodes, because I ask for book recommendations from all of my guests, and they're all on there. So Feminist Founders has its own bookshop. But if you go to bookshop.org, whether you use Feminist Founders or not, the purchases you make, you can designate a local bookstore that will actually get a cut of what you buy. So you're supporting locally owned bookstores, but still being able to order online. So it's another great resource.
That is so cool. Okay. And I'm going to have to get you.
No reason to buy books from Amazon anymore. They royally screw over authors. So
yes,
if you can avoid it, avoid it.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. Two super easy spots we can go to rather than just default Amazon app, Audible, and just be able to start to make that shift to support Black owned, minority owned, a different crowd. Right. So yay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
Thank you. I love talking about all of this. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. And I think your voice and your experience as a white woman navigating into this space is super important and super valuable. So thank you for doing the work. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. I'm trying. It's all I can do. We're all just on the journey. So yeah, just keep trying.
Exactly.